Good evening. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. I'd like to open tonight's meeting of the Kingston School Committee. This meeting is being recorded by the local scene. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify the chair at this time. Okay, great. So first, I'll just start. I know some people are here for the budget. I think I don't see any strangers, but I will just mention we have a few things to get through before we get to the budget, just so we're all on the same page. Do we have any visitors that would like to speak? Okay, excellent. Oh. Oh. Thank you, Emily. Say that again? Okay. Asking to speak? Okay. Jen White has a hand up. Did you want to speak?
Hey, yes, can you hear me? Just wanted to check my audio.
Okay.
You can hear me?
Yep.
All right, sorry, it's just coming in faded on my end. So I just wanted to start and just thank a number of the school committee members that I have spoken with thus far. I know I've talked to Jean Coleman, Tim Lewis, who has since, I think, resigned from the school committee. But essentially what I'd like to know, and I don't know if you can respond to me in this format, I've been stonewalled by a number of committee members, town employees, et cetera. And I don't know if it's over, political issues or whatnot, but all politics and personal opinions aside, I think an extremely important data point for the town of Kingston and taxpayers to understand is the amount of money that we've paid thus far out to the emergency shelter program. And I know everyone's entitled to an education and all sorts of things, but the numbers that have been reported as far as what we've seen as reimbursements from the state has been pretty scattered, but it doesn't really take a genius to kind of tally up the number that we've seen go out versus come in. So I was just wondering, at any point, will you all make that information readily available to taxpayers? Or is it going to be hidden in the future as it has been thus far?
I'm not sure how to answer that.
We generally don't answer.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure if that's something we might get to at some point during our meeting, but we will keep that under advisement as we move along in terms of how we share information.
So basically, the format of these meetings doesn't allow you to respond. So we'll continue to be stonewalled is the answer. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak?
I just want to end by saying it's disgraceful. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing as we have no other visitors, next up on our agenda is approval of regular minutes from December 2nd, 2024.
I make a motion to approve the meetings minutes from December 2nd, 2024.
Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, actually, I'm going to pause the meeting at this time and go back and do a roll call vote, which I realized I did not do when I opened the meeting. Michael Chicane.
Here.
Jeannie Coleman.
Here, and Sheila's on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
She just texted back.
Excellent. Sheila Vaughn.
Wonderful. He unmuted me. I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trisha Arietta.
Present.
And I am here. Okay, thank you. I apologize for that. Back to our regularly scheduled agenda. We just approved our minutes. Teachers Corner. Do we have anybody that would like to speak?
We hope everyone had a nice holiday. There was a lot that happened in December in both buildings. We had the Polar Express Day that Ms. Fishkin can tell you a little bit about.
We had our full day. We brought back the pre-COVID full day experience of Polar Express where the kids ride the Polar Express to different activities throughout the day. They wear pajamas through the day. They have hot chocolate in their classrooms. And it was a nice way to end the week before Christmas break.
Many other activities happened in both buildings with parent volunteers in a lot of centers, learning about different traditions around the world. There was a pajama drive at KIS that was very successful. There was also a lip dub that happened at KIS during the month of December, which the kids were very excited about. Upcoming in both buildings, we're entering benchmark testing season. So all the students will be receiving their benchmark assessments for this time of the midway benchmark, and we'll get to see their growth percentiles from the beginning of the year to now. So that's exciting. And we just look forward to, getting back in the swing of a traditional learning pattern. So it'll be
And
great.
one other quick thing, the Kingston teachers before vacation did a hat and glove drive for the Plymouth Area Coalition and collected over 180 pairs of hats and gloves to be donated to the Plymouth Area Coalition. So that was before vacation.
That's great. PTO report.
I know of upcoming events. I was a part of the there was a rapping event in December. Cupcake Charlie, 100 who's coming up and on March 31st, the Harlem Wizards will be back in town.
Just speak to the wrapping. Just heard today that it raised approximately $11,000, which will help fund those field trips for KES and PIS. So thanks to all who helped out.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, principal's report, Dr. Whipple. Kidding. All right, I think I'd get it by now. So on Friday, we received word that they were, we knew that they shipped the equipment on December 13th, and we received word on Friday that they would be able to start the playground renovation. So started Friday, Monday, and because of the cold temperatures, it's going to take a few more days, but I'm hopeful by the end of the week, we'll be all set and ready to play. So special thanks again to the community who really stepped up to help fundraise. The value of the month is teamwork. So students are learning what it means to be part of a team and showing teamwork and working together. They continue to get recognized every Friday. To piggyback on what Ms. Levitt, Ms. Pishkin said, Polar Express Day was phenomenal. Seeing the kids' faces as they walked into school where we made snow was just incredible. The parents enjoyed it as well. I think the amazing part was we had 142 volunteers that day of the event, and then 70 parents who helped prep materials prior to the event, which is awesome because not everyone could take the day off work or time off work. So it's nice to have that many people. During the event, we did a lot of different academic activities such as STEM, music activities, our different art activities, as well as virtual field trips in the library. We have our second annual multicultural night that's coming up. It's going to be Thursday, January 23rd from 5 to 7. We're excited because we have the following countries being represented: Panama, Jamaica, Cape Verde, Sweden, Italy, Dominican Republic, Pakistan, Brazil, Ireland, Greece, Armenia, Poland, Romania, and Puerto Rico. So families are going to be coming to our school and teaching the whole community about what their cultures are all about. So we're excited for that. Lego Day is coming up, which is a great way to work together on teamwork. So Tuesday, January 28th, classrooms are going to be challenged to create a Lego masterpiece and using teamwork. So we're excited for that. As they also mentioned, benchmark assessments are coming up. So I'm psyched to see the development that we have from fall benchmark to January benchmark to see all the growth. After we get that benchmark assessment done, we have data meetings grade level wise, and then our students meet with Mr. G and the response team during community meetings to talk about the values of the month, school expectations, and grit. And I think that's all I had. Any questions for me? Okay, thanks. I don't know if there's a flyer. I didn't see one. All right, Mr. Materna.
Good evening, Andy Materna, Kingston Intermediate School. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. I want to update the committee, first of all, on open positions at KIS. We are just about at 100% capacity with filling our positions, with the one position of the lead custodian, which we are currently interviewing applicants to fill that role. As was mentioned earlier, the December lip dub has been shared out with parents through Parent Square. We've got a lot of hits on the YouTube channel. I shared the link there for anybody to look at if anybody hasn't seen it. This is a great community event, building the culture and positive culture in the building. It involves every staff member that wants to be a part of it, every student that wants to be a part of it, and we have some lead roles as well. I'd like to thank Dr. Brzezzi for all his work that he's done helping out with this. Bringing the community, the school community together in this 1 6-minute film. It's been a lot of fun the past couple of years. We hope to do more. Some upcoming events. January 9th and 16th, we have some field trips that are happening with 6th graders going to the Patriots Place Museum. And we also have the STAR testing window at KIS opens January 13th and it goes through January 24th. So there are different grades testing at different times throughout that time. One final mention from me is I'd like to thank all the volunteers, like Harry said and Stacia said, of the parents that are coming together to support KIS, to see the parents coming in. I mentioned this at the last school committee meeting as well. The overwhelming amount of support that we have from parents volunteering, being a part of the community, helping build the community and showing the students what it's like, what it means to be a community is really important. It's really overwhelming. So very appreciative of all of the support from all the parents, from all the community members to help build Kingston schools and KIS in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
And that has to go through the STAR testing, or is it third and fifth, or?
Everybody does the STAR testing, and it's at KIS, just grade 3 does the Dibbles testing.
Questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Thank you.
All right. Then we have our financial report from our Director of Business, Sarah Hickey.
Chair. Report that was in your folder. Just last meeting, page 2 at the top, both KES and KIS long-term sublines are overspent, but that is made up for by the regular sped lines. It's going to be helpful for us moving forward to always think about, long-term substitute lines. I don't know what I just said, substitute lines. It's going to be helpful for us to think about long-term subs and regular everyday subs as kind of a lump sum. On page 2, the contracted service KIS reflects that we moved the copy machines from the 4,000 lines to the 2,000 lines. 4,000 is physical plant, 2,000 is instruction. We made that move this year. On page 2, you can also see that ESY was budgeted in the tuition line. It's being paid out of new appropriate lines. Those are the new lines that we've spoken about in the past. The bottom of page 3 and top of page 4, there were school adjustment counselors that were moved from the special ed budget to the regular ed budget. There is money in the budget for them. It was just in the special ed lines last year, but those aren't special ed positions. So we're paying them out of regular ed. On page 4, there was a new line created for contracted services for nursing for a 1-to-1 nurse. On page 5 at the bottom, contracted services KIS building, there was necessary work done on sewer ejector pumps. This overage will be filled by utilizing payroll from unfilled staff positions. On page 7, the special ed contracted services at KES are overspent due to an outrageous price increase for OTPT services that we were notified about over the summer. overall, from the special ed department, the summary of the tuition, transportation and contracted services line show a current surplus of almost $218,000 for those lines. Any questions about the financial report?
Oh, my God.
On page 4, the transportation for KES and KIS, those are different amounts. Should they be the same since it's the same bus? Or is that something?
I inherited the transportation spreadsheet from my predecessor, and in the past, the transportation has been split up 3/7 and 4/7. So you have 3 grades in one building and 4 grades in another building. So the money is split up in that way. And that actually, for my end of year reporting for the Department of Education, that's helpful because if we budgeted it and paid it out as one lump sum, I would have to then go split it up at the end of the year.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Sarah, is now a good time to ask about the shelter reimbursement that's in our folder for tonight? Sorry.
I didn't put that in there.
Okay, no,
So,
sorry.
in terms of the shelter reimbursement, we can provide you with a summary of what funds we have received. We can also provide you with a per pupil cost, but we can't provide you itemized listing of specific students and anything like that. So we're certainly not trying to stonewall, but it's certainly not something that we could provide in a here visitor section. It's something that if the school committee asks us to compile that information, we can compile that for an upcoming meeting.
That actually wasn't my question though. Sorry, but I do appreciate that update because that was a way to get it in under the topic, but I guess I'm curious as to I thought I saw something in our folder tonight, which I think Dr. Clifford's aware of what I'm talking about. And to your point, Dr. Peru, I just went back because I plan on talking about it during our budget discussion to see how much we've received so far. And then my other question, which maybe Sarah can prepare before we get to that point, is how many students we have, just so that we can let everyone have transparency, but at the same time, we can't direct as to what in each individual student costs.
Okay. So are we gonna come back to the grant?
That's gonna be.
That's gonna be for Dr. Clifford? Yeah,
Dr.
okay,
Clifford.
okay. Super. Okay, so I think. Great, Dr. Clifford, you're up next. Oh, do
I'm
you more?
sorry, I'm taking notes. I just want to clarify the
Sure.
information that you're looking for. We have a number of homeless shelters in town.
Yep.
Are we looking for all of them? Or,
I believe, because it's going to come up later in the budget presentation as well, perhaps in terms of ELL or something as well. In terms of transparency with what the public is requesting from us, perhaps, the number that we know floats around 60 because we know that number because of busing specifically that one, but in terms of the amount that we've received in reimbursements. And I think we have that.
So the emergency shelter relief pertains to one. The emergency shelter relief pertains to one particular group
Yep.
of students.
Yep.
Not necessarily all homeless students.
Correct.
Okay, just clarify.
Yep.
okay, so for me to get that information, I'm gonna have to go back and pick through all the letters that we've received.
Oh, I just did it. Oh, I just, no, but I think that we've only received 3, right?
Yes,
Okay, yep, I got it. I just did that. I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify that's all we received.
and,
Thank you.
and my understanding is that's all we're going to receive.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Clifford.
Okay, hi, everyone. Happy New Year. I have a few updates tonight. First, district-wide information, and then I'll talk about some secondary information, and then end with some elementary specific information. So district-wide information, as part of the K through 12 curriculum review cycle, we formed a mass steering committee, K through 12. The mass steering committee comprises 2 separate committees, the K through 6 core review team and the 7 through 12 core review team. The K through 6 core review team will conduct a core program review, comprehensive process, including reviewing and selecting high-quality instructional materials. The 7 through 12 core review team will discuss and determine curriculum, instruction, and assessment topics to review, including reviewing and selecting high-quality instructional materials for grades 7 and 8 specifically. The Math Steering Committee, which is the larger overall group, meets during those 3 dates listed. They have 2 more dates that they're going to be meeting. The K through 6 core review team, which will be having its first meeting tomorrow, and then you can see all the subsequent meetings that they'll be having. And they'll begin their core program review, looking at different mathematics curriculums. And we've been able to bring together a wide array of faculty members from throughout all 3 districts. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about the participation that we have from teachers on that committee. And the 7 through 12 core review team, they'll be meeting on those dates. Their first meeting is on the 9th. And the Math Steering Committee will present to the school committee probably in late May, early June. And so at that point, we'll summarize the work we've done. I'll update you as time goes on as to what those 2 different sort of committees, the K through 6 and the 7 through 12 committee, are working on. And again, I'm really excited. This work involves the principals, faculty members from all 3 schools, and myself. So I'll update you as time goes on. The second piece is the literacy needs assessment. That's a K through 12 work that we've been doing. All focus groups, inventories, and surveys have been completed by all 4 districts. A report from the Hill for Literacy will be discussed with the district literacy leadership team on January 23rd. And on March 6th, the ELLT will meet to draft a district literacy plan. So I'll also be updating you on what that group's doing, the outcome of the report that they're going to provide us, and then the planning that will follow up. So I'll provide some updates on that too as we move along. Secondary information, you probably all have heard about the competency determination. MCAS is not a requirement. Students must meet the local district graduation requirements. So we have, as you all know, specific graduation requirements that all students must fulfill in order to graduate from Silver Lake Regional High School. Participation on MCAS is required by federal and state law, so students still will participate in taking MCAS, just not required for competency determination. The different scholarships, the Adams, the Koplik, and the Seal of Biliteracy will all continue to use MCAS as scores for qualifying. And that's a really important piece for students at grade 10 to understand that the Adams scholarship still depends on doing well on MCAS. And the last piece is the elementary K through 6 information. So writing professional learning communities, so writing groups throughout the district at K through 6 level, spent time in November and early December analyzing and reflecting on the fall writing benchmark. They'll do a writing benchmark again during that first week of March. And so this is an assessment created by teachers, administered by teachers, scored. They get together and calibrate and look at the different pieces of writing and talk about how they might change their instruction or what went well and what they need to continue. So it really informs instruction. It really informs tiered intervention with writing too. Star reading, someone asked about that. Star reading, math, and DIBELS assessments in January. They'll be happening soon. And then grade level data meetings will be happening at the end of January and beginning of February. Again, those will inform not only instruction, but tiered intervention for students to make sure they're accessing and doing well on the grade level curriculum. The MCAS windows I've put there too, just so families know about them. And I know principals will be communicating. The English language arts MCAS window runs from March 24th to April 18th. Math runs from April 28th to May 23rd. And science, technology, and engineering runs from April 28th to May 23rd. Specific schedules have been basically, we've worked on them. We know when we're going to be administering the different sessions. And as I said, principals will be communicating out to families. And I think that's an important piece to just remind everyone to mark those dates on their calendars. And the last piece is a grant, DESE grant, and it's entitled the Multilingual Newcomer and Homeless Support Grant. So in the fall, I applied for a grant from the Department of Ed, and the grant was entitled, as it says, Multilingual Newcomer and Homeless Support Grant. And I was able to apply for Kingston and Silver Lake. And I received, I was awarded the grant for Kingston and a grant for Silver Lake. The grant includes funding for translation and interpretation fees, professional development for faculty, staff, and families specific to multilingual learners, social emotional learning and outreach to families, instructional materials to help support multilingual learners in mathematics and early literacy. And I think that may be in your packet tonight, that grant for Kingston was, I believe, $12,500. And for Silver Lake, it was a little bit over $7,000. And so I don't think we approved that. I don't think this committee has approved that grant.
No,
yet.
not
Okay.
yet.
So it just will require your committee to approve accepting those grant funds. Again, they were $12,500. They covered those specific areas that I just spoke about. I'm working with principals to make sure they utilize those funds. And we've been in communication. They helped give input as to the writing of the grant. So anyway, I'm asking for approval for that.
Sure.
Dr. Clifford, thank you for that presentation, because that does answer why Sarah over here probably didn't have the same information because. I'm sorry. That answers the question as to why Sarah didn't have that same information, because this is different from the reimbursements that we've received. And I didn't make that connection until you just presented it like that. So this is something entirely different.
Yes.
It's not coming from the state, it's coming from a grant program from the state. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
the Department of Ed, but a separate grant
Separate
program
grant.
from them. Yep.
Entirely separate.
Anyone, people could apply for that. Yep.
So then I guess my question to Sarah, would that be part of the 3 reimbursements that we received, or would that be?
The 3 reimbursements that you
Yep.
received, the last reimbursement was in August.
Yep.
And that is, you're done with that.
The last,
3 reimbursements that we received, the last reimbursement we received in August, and we will no longer be receiving those.
Okay.
checks.
thank you. And I apologize because that's where that confusion was. So I will make a motion that we accept the $12,500 grant and appreciate you applying for that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, all in favor?
I,
Okay.
I'm out.
Dr. Prim.
So the first item that I want to point out is that there is an update from Department of Education with regards to the competency determination, which Dr. Clifford has spoken on. This update was sent out to all families. It's question and answers, common question and answers, and we wanted you to have it as part of your packet. In addition, this was something that we went over in more detail at the Silver Lake meeting, in our last Silver Lake meeting. So that's in there for you. Second item that I wanted to go over with you before we get to the budget tonight is the draft calendar. And you'll notice most of the information here is similar to the past. To a great extent, we tried to mirror past calendars, but there are some things that I want to point out to you. The 25th and the 26th are our in-service days for teachers. August 27th would be the first day of school. You'll notice that December 23rd is an early release day. And we would be returning on January 2nd. So I would not I'm sorry, we wouldn't be returning until January 5th. I'm not recommending opening for the 2nd that one day. And then if you look at May 29th, that's the graduation date that we have set, and June 12th as the tentative last day of school. However, you'll notice 5 snow days are built in. And that brings us to June 22nd as the anticipated last day of school. And I didn't know if you had any, we also noted, if you notice on June 22nd, we noted per the request of this committee in particular, that the last day of school is a half day for elementary schools and the middle school. Now,
Thank you so much.
recognizing that the last day of school differs depending upon the number of days that we have to take off. So I'm hoping for a vote of support for this calendar this evening so that we can move forward with our other districts and get the calendars settled as soon as possible.
I'll make a motion to accept the proposed 25-26 school calendar as written in appreciation of the annotation on the bottom of the calendar to avoid any confusion.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So the next thing I'd like to ask is if we could call up our budget presentation for this evening. So that members at, who are joining us online can also follow along.
For sending along that information, because I actually used it for my college to send about the information about the MCAS, because we were not given any information regarding it. So I thought it was really interesting that you did that, and it was, the question answers were very good, so I appreciate it.
Good, I'm glad it was helpful. Good. That's the, something different, not the presentation.
It's the one that is, it's got EEI at the top of it. Keep going to the left.
That one. You're on it. Yeah.
Okay,
No,
nope,
you're on the other one.
that one. Yes. Okay, so we're going to start with the title slide. Just want to begin by reminding everyone of the process that goes into creating this budget. In the fall, we asked for input from the communities. We asked for input from our school committees in particular as to what they would like to see us present and how they would like to see the budget presented in this preliminary stage. In addition, we reach out to our principals and to each of our leads at central office. So whether it be special education, curriculum instruction, and our facilities director, we ask for him to work with our building principals to help outline some capital projects that may need prioritizing, but also considerations for their maintenance and operations budgets as well. So there are a number of people who have the responsibility of putting together information to make sure that we have the materials and the staffing necessary. We ask them to begin by creating a level service budget. What would they need if everything remained the same in terms of staffing and needs? In addition, Sarah takes a number of items and creates estimates for things such as utilities and puts those into the budget. And Sarah will go over in detail tonight some of the things that may appear a little bit different than the past. But this is truly a group effort and presentation. So if we go on to the goals, it's a little bit different this year than it has been in the past, unfortunately. So while we created a level service budget for you to see, the level service budget that we originally created was close to 20% increase just to maintain what we have. So we had a school committee meeting where school committee said, what would it look like if it was 3%? The town later came back and said, show us what it would look like if Kingston were at 4%. What would that mean? In terms of supporting student needs academically and developmentally, that's always our priority. In addition to that, we look at when we have to make cuts, we take a look at things like class sizes, but we're certainly not able at 4% to maintain class sizes. And we always strive to consider the fiscal conditions of the towns that we represent, in particular in this community, Kingston. In terms of supporting the strategy of district improvement, however, you're not going to hear us discussing a lot of ways in which a 4% budget would help us to do that, because a 4% budget would actually mean reductions. And so therefore, it's not actually helping us to meet our strategy for district improvement. In many cases, it would be asking us to take programs and staffing and in some cases eliminate them. So we just wanted to highlight that, because while that is our goal, it's not necessarily possible with this particular version that we're going to focus on tonight. So now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Superintendent Crew. I wanted to start off by explaining why the FY26 budget looks different. So you've probably heard the phrase building the plane as you're flying it. I'm actually flying the FY 25 budget plane and building the FY 26 budget beside it. And the FY 26 budget needed some adjustments with what we call the chart of account, which are those line numbers that you see at the beginning. So though this is a multi-step process. I created the new budget lines and we've created the budget. That's an October to January process. I have to enter the new budget lines into the financial software. That's going to be February through May. Upload the approved budget into the financial software in June, and then we're going to go live with the new budget lines. These new budget lines will allow me to hone down the information in a much nicer way and run some very effective reports out of our financial system. So I wanted to explain that there are 6 ways that a school district can spend money, and through the DESE chart of accounts, Department of Elementary Secondary Education gives us a chart of accounts that matches up with I can't remember what UMAS stands for. It's the United Massachusetts Accounting System or something like that. So everything all goes hand in hand between municipal account numbers and school account numbers. So we can spend money on professional salaries, clerical salaries, and other salaries. Those other salaries are, custodians, subs, paras, etc. You can see that I put a line there after that. I went through these first 3 slides essentially with the principals back 3 months ago. Everything above the line gets handled in the business office. All of the salaries come out of payroll. Everything below the line comes from accounts payable. So when the principals were working on their budgets, they were budgeting for contracted services, supplies and materials, and other expenditures. So when the principals spend money, it's below the line. When the principals hire somebody, it's above that line. But these are the only ways we can spend money. And then we spend this money in broad categories, which are on the next slide. So the Department of Education divides up all of their accounts into what we refer to as the thousands. So the 1,000 accounts are for district leadership and administration. The 2,000s, instructional services. Put a big star next to that one. We're a school system, that's what we do. So you'll notice that most of our expenditures fall in instructional lines. 3,000 accounts are other school services. That's nursing and transportation and extracurricular activities. 4,000 accounts are operations and maintenance of the physical plant. If you remember, I said earlier, we had a copy machine at KIS that was in a 4,000 account. I've moved that into instruction because the teachers use that to create instructional materials. So it should go in a line where when I report it to the Department of Education in the end of year report, it gives credit to the right line. The 5,000 accounts are fixed charges. There are not any 5,000 accounts in the Kingston budget. That's benefits and insurance. Those are covered by the town. The 6,000 accounts, there's also no 6,000 accounts in the Kingston budget. Those are community services. That's very rarely used in any school in Massachusetts. The 7,000 accounts, acquisition, improvement, and replacement of fixed assets. That's for non-instructional equipment greater than $5,000. So if you're going to buy a new mower or a big tech purchase, that goes in the 7,000 accounts. 8,000 accounts are debt retirement. That again is that would be a town account, not a school account. And the 9,000s are programs with other schools. So our 9,000 accounts are our tuition accounts, and we have special ed tuitions and vocational and agricultural school tuitions in those accounts. Question?
So for things like subscriptions and computer equipment, those would all be in the 2,000 accounts?
It depends what the computer equipment is.
Okay.
If it's networking hardware, it would be in the 4,000 accounts because it's part of the physical plant. But if it's devices for students and teachers or software for students, peripherals, printers, things like that, it would be in the 2000s.
Thank you.
So going on to the next page, here's a summary. The town has projected a 4% increase for Kingston Elementary Schools for FY 26. 4% increase on the FY 25 budget would be $15,151,490. The Kingston Elementary level service budget for FY 26 is $17,186,841. After deducting anticipated circuit breaker reimbursement of $253,983, there's a difference of 1.7 million that needed to be addressed. So the school administrators and district administration met multiple times and left no stone unturned. And what we have on the next 3 slides for you is 3 tiers of budget cuts that would get us to that $1.7 million in cuts. So if you take a look at tier one total is $57,950. These cuts have already been made. So in the budget spreadsheet that I shared with you, these have already been subtracted out. So that $57,950 is made up of at KES, teachers' desks, social emotional learning programs, school-wide themes, a new vacuum, landscaping, snow blower repair, and flexible seating for the classrooms. For a total of $15,300 at KIS. The cuts there were for lawn maintenance, miscellaneous maintenance of grounds, maintenance of building supplies, furniture, custodial supplies, classroom supplies, and an excess paraprofessional. That is somebody that was budgeted for last year, but has not been hired yet. And so that's why that's in there. That is the only staff that you'll see in tier one. Going on to tier two, keeping in mind that we're looking for $1.7 million in cuts to meet the 4% goal. Tier two is $799,000 in cuts. That includes 8.6 FTE, stands for full-time equivalent. So 8.6 FTE full-time unit E and 3.0 FTE part-time unit E. So that's actually 6 half-time positions. 2.0 FTE from unit D and 5.0 FTE from unit A. Before we continue to tier three, on the next slide, there's some revenue options that we may want to discuss. One of the potential revenue options would be to charge bus fees for students that live under 2 miles. The second that we could consider would be to move to a half-day kindergarten and charge for a full-day students. So those are options to offset these cuts that we're having.
Megan, may I? Can you share the cost of the busing or the full day kindergarten? That would be charged to those families that are affected by that.
I don't have that I don't have that information. I can get projections for you for the next meeting. But again, we don't know who the kindergarten students are yet because they're just registering. So the number, we don't know the number, but I can give you projections based on previous years.
I just mean like the cost of what full day kindergarten would be for those families that would take that option. Not necessarily the number of kindergarten students.
Okay.
Sarah, do you know how many students live under 2 miles?
I am awaiting a spreadsheet from First Student where they'll give me a breakdown of the door-to-door distance from, actually I say door-to-door, but it's where the student's driveway meets the street to the door of the school.
Are you able to?
Go ahead.
Are you able to also get like within a half mile, 1 mile?
So
just so we
the,
could-
the spreadsheet that they give me, this is actually an exercise I've gone through with Halifax within the past couple of months. The spreadsheet that they give me says this child A lives 1.2 miles from school. This child B lives 1.3 miles from school. So when they get me the spreadsheet, I'm able to break it down, and the distances I'm really interested are, who's within a mile, who's within 1 to 2 miles, and who's over 2 miles. The law says we're required to provide transportation to students that live more than 2 miles or more from school. Anybody else is optional, and therefore we can charge fees for that. We can't charge fees for students that receive free and reduced lunch, the low income students.
And then just one follow-up on that, if students were walking or come here, some other means, do we have to consider crossing guards or anything like that? Be replacement?
I previously worked in a district with crossing guards that made a very nice hourly wage because they worked a couple hours a day in horrible conditions sometimes. And the budget for the entire town was $35,000. That was Middleborough, same number, well, more schools than here.
Just something I think we should consider. Let me get them. Sorry.
Here's a question. I thought this, and I know you weren't here in 2020, but I thought during the pandemic, this had come up in part of the conversation about charging. And I thought the answer was we couldn't because we're partially regionalized.
Yes. So we were advised that because we were sharing buses, that we should not be charging tuitions. However, we have since disentangled in some cases. And even though we have one bus, a separate bus account for Kingston that we charge, we also have confirmed with the Department of Education that it would be allowable for Kingston. Now, if Kingston were to one day become fully regionalized, you would not be able to charge for busing, but you would be entitled to regional transportation reimbursement, which would be a large.
About $1 million.
So Silver Lake Regional for 31 regional buses for the middle school and high school gets a reimbursement on the magnitude of $780,000-800,000. Those same 31 buses transport all the students for Halifax, Kingston, and Plimpton. So if we were a fully regionalized all 3 towns, it would be fair to say that it'd be an additional $800,000 in regional transportation we would get. And at that point, we wouldn't be able to charge for busing.
If I may anticipate another question, full regionalization would be at least a 2-year process. So it wouldn't help us this year.
Just as a comment, we just got the grant to look into that.
Yes.
So more information to come on that.
Sorry, one more question regarding the buses, though. It is fair to say, though, that because we're not fully regionalized, a child that's less than 2 miles from KES or KIS may not have to pay for busing for middle and high school if they live more than 2 miles away. Because that's a different,
Students don't pay for bus, can't pay
because they're part of the region.
because it's part of the region.
So it would be elementary and intermediate school based.
Yes.
Any more questions right now?
One more question. Do we know if they're all at capacity, or is there opportunity to eliminate any routes?
I can get that information from per student.
I think we have. space for the buses.
We're not required to provide it.
I remember during COVID too, we have to have the spaces for the buses for the people that wanted to have the bus. And it was a big mess because they were empty. And yet we still had to have the space in case they wanted to be on the bus.
Yes, so the COVID rules were different
Okay,
than what we're required to provide now.
many years of,
Yep.
Just wait for the next slide. Won't sleep for days.
So if you could go to the next slide, Emily. So again, keeping in mind, we're looking to cut $1.7 million to meet the 4% goal. That would leave tier 3, $975,000 that needed to be cut. There's really is not anywhere else to make cuts left in the budget. So that would be 13 FTE Unit A employees. So the bulk of the cuts would be in tier 3. And that's it.
Megan, can I just clarify that this would be in addition to both tier 1 and tier 2?
Yes.
I also just want to mention for anyone who may not be aware or who is online listening, Unit A are our teachers. Unit E are the paraprofessionals, and Unit D are custodial. So if you're looking to see how well that's broken out, that's what that was. So cumulatively, if we make it through tier 3, we would be looking at an 18 teacher loss and 11.6 paraprofessionals and 2 custodians, which in my personal opinion would cripple our schools, to say the least. You please do. Yes.
So with these 3 tiers that were presented here so far, you know, we haven't gone through everything, is a reduction in force the initial stab at trying to get to that 1.7, or
These 3 tiers get us to the 1.7.
is there anything else that outside of eliminating positions that
So if you look at tier 1, that anything that was outside of staffing that could be cut was cut. There are certain things that aren't staff that yes, we spend money on, but no, you can't cut your paper towel and your toilet paper and your electricity. And there's some basics that we just have to have. Copy paper for the copy machines.
Which we've allowed the budget, the Silver Lake budget is already hitting capacity midway through the year. I just learned this week with copy paper. So that's what happened when we cut supplies last year. Real thing.
But so what I'm trying to get at without sounding cool or anything is there opportunity to look at compensation and contracts, see?
So we have to fulfill our contractual obligations. We can't. So we have some independent contracts. Those we are obligated to honor. The contracts that we have with our bargaining units, we are obligated to honor those amounts. So again, it would have to be an agreement between both parties, and the reality is that it's not certainly not something that could be required, I guess is the best way to say it.
And I think they've tried to pick out everything that's not.
Oh, no, exactly, and that's why I went
We have,
last year, year before, and then looking at the plain numbers, it's.
we have, and rightfully so, the majority of our budget is in fact staffing. So when you talk about cuts to this extent, it's bound to impact staffing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna make a suggestion.
I'll have Jeannie's point towards
I'm
me
just gonna
too.
make a suggestion. We let Sarah/Jill
Yeah.
kind of finish the presentation, and then we can kind of come back to this.
So if we could go to the next slide. So the budget that was in your binder, I'm sorry, in your packet, in your digital packet, utilities in there include an increase. So I took a 4-year average, the past 4 years, and put an increase on that average. The shared cost budget is included in there, but has not been voted on yet. There's homeless and foster transportation numbers in there that were adjusted based on the 4-year average as well. It's good to look at prior year expenses. There are no known retirements at this time. So sometimes you hear people having conversations about retirements, but until there's a piece of paper that gets to HR and to the superintendent, there's nothing that we can do as far as budgeting for that. As far as out-of-district vocational, those are the Norfolk agricultural and Bristol agricultural students. Kingston currently has 6 students in programs in both of those schools. I have budgeted 8 placements. I've budgeted tuition and transportation for 8 students to agricultural programs. We currently don't have any applications for agricultural schools. I am going to keep my eye on this, but the applications are due by April 1st. So as the applications come in, I will adjust the number for these students.
Can I ask you one quick question? Are any of them seniors of the 6?
So these are the 6 that are on this list are grades 9, 10, and 11.
Great.
All right, so
Thank you.
I already subtracted out the seniors.
All right,
And we just don't know about any grade 9 yet.
right. Okay, thank you.
Going to the next slide. So notable increases in level services, and those are the for the 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 accounts. SPED leadership was moved from the administrative, the 1,000 lines, into the instruction, the 2,000 lines. We had multiple other expenses moved to appropriate categories. So I've already spoken about the copy machine moving from building maintenance into instruction. But there's lots of examples of things that needed to be shifted. There's an increase in all transportation costs, an increase in costs for all supplies and materials, an increase to maintain the physical plant. There were increases in all tuitions. Some of the special ed tuitions were greater than the 3.67 OST, the Operational Services Division, puts out a cost of inflation for tuitions every year. So the out-of-district tuitions have to have an increase of 3.67% only unless you apply for an exception. And then if that's granted, it might be some sort of outrageous increase. One of the things I want to point out to you is, again, salaries make up the largest portion of our budget, and the teacher's contract, I'm going to use that as an example. There was a 3% increase from FY25 to FY26, but I want to talk specifically. In FY25, a teacher with a master's degree on step 5 would earn $72,956. In FY26, that master's degree step 5 is $75,145, the 3% increase that was negotiated. But a teacher that's on step 5 in FY25 is now going to be on step 6 in FY26. So that teacher would be on master's 6 next year, which is $78,545. And that's a 7.7% increase. So when we say that the teacher's salary schedule increased by 3%, for any teacher that is still getting steps, there's always a 7 to 8% increase. And that's one of the things that you'll see in here. Next slide belongs to Harry.
This just has the projected enrollment for next year. Right now, kindergarten registration is open and we have currently 65 students registered. In order to get the kindergarten number, I just took an average of the past 5 years for kindergarten. So it's about 164, where this year it's 190 currently right now. So 164 is definitely on the lower end that it's been, but there's kind of no real way to tell just yet. But this just shows the historical numbers. You can see to the right there, there's been, obviously increase in enrollment over the years, especially from 2020.
Next slide, please. Similarly, at KIS, we've seen an increase from 2016 Next year's projected enrollment is 660 students at KIS. Comparatively, that's 70 more students than just a few years ago back in 21-22. And this, everything that Sarah's been talking about, you know, we've talked about the impacts of the request of the 4%. But when Carrie and I created our level funded our level service budget, we identified actual areas of need prior to the cuts. So this is, the next slide is going to show additions that Carrie and I believe that we need to what we have currently as the level service. So if we go to the next slide. So specifically through a shared position, the first one, a shared position between KES and KIS of a 1.0 FTE EL teacher. And Tricia's going to talk more later about the EL needs currently in Kingston. KES and KIS and NECC partnership program. That's something that Dr. Panarisi can talk more about if you have questions about that. At KIS specifically, a 1.0 FTE grade 4 teacher, similar to my presentation from last year with the numbers of students in grade 4, and moving up from grade 3 and the numbers of students in grade 3, just to keep the classroom sizes small. At KES, an increase of music from 1.0 or to 1.0 from a 0.6, that's at KES. KIS, an increase in math interventionist to 1.0 from 0.6. And also at KES, a 1.0 FTE grade 1 level teacher.
If I can just clarify the music, because our music teacher is 0.6 at KES and 0.4 at KIS. So if we made it 1.0 at KES, it would mean the need for a band teacher over at KIS. That's something we've talked about for a few years. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these are, you guys looked at level services. It's not in the budget, it's not the cuts. It's just that as you looked at level services moving forward based on our enrollment, this is what you guys are looking at. Like, these are the needs that you're thinking that would be most beneficial to the students.
Yeah, so when we looked at the budget and thinking about reflecting on the whole year and enrollment, these are things that we know, like we're not meeting the recommended minutes for our English language learners. It's difficult for me to meet the music needs in my building, to make sure I'm inclusive of all populations, especially special education. And then looking at class size, just historically where we've tried to be as a goal for Kingston, my kindergarten numbers being at 190, I kind of thought, well, I'd like those first grade classrooms to have an additional teacher. Not only is it one of the most important years in school for learning to read, but it's also the physical spaces in my classrooms are significantly smaller than the K rooms.
I was going to ask that question about physical space. If there's like an extra 80 kids or whatever from 2020 to now, or 2020, 2016. I think you mentioned a long time ago that there was a study that we could do. I don't know, like it feels like if the students are getting if the buildings are getting at capacity.
The buildings are getting tight.
Yeah.
As far as classroom spaces, we'd be able to figure out we'd be able to add another classroom at this point if that was to happen.
That's okay.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
We may tell you about that.
Let's see.
English learner education, Kingston students receiving EL services, 100 Kingston students at December 24. 55 students are at KES and 51 students are at KIS. EL services are provided by 2 Kingston EL teachers. One is a K-2 teacher and the other is a grade 3 through 6 teacher. The structure is based on student need and EL education recommendations from DESE, which I'll talk a little bit more about. How students are identified as EL students. Students new to the district complete a home language survey and take a WIDA screener if needed. Based on their score, they may be identified as an EL student. Students already in the district take the access test each year. January and February is generally when it's administered, and their score determines the extent of their services. So EL students take an assessment. It's called the access testing in January or February of the school year. How they do on that test puts them in a certain level. That level determines the amount of service that is required for students at that level. Some students have 2 periods of EL per day. Other students have 1 period or less depending on their needs. These levels are below recommended levels for students to make progress with their language skills as it stands now, and as the recommendation is from the Department of Ed. EL instruction is required to be delivered by a licensed EL teacher. Students become former ELs or FELs when they score at least a 4.2 on that access test that I just spoke about. They're monitored for 4 more years. I'll go on to the next piece, next slide, which outlines a little bit more in detail the different levels, recommended periods of EL instruction. You could just page up a little bit there on the next slide, recommended period. Yep. So this slide right here explains when you score on the access test, your foundational, if you're at level 1, 2, or 3, access 2.0 overall scores would be between 1 and 2.4. You're considered a transitional student if you score a level 3, level 4, or level 5. And again, districts may determine whether the group at the WIDA level 3 stays at foundational or transitional. It depends on the student needs because sometimes there's more complex issues at play with students. So that's often a determination a district will make. So basically you have foundational students and you have transitional students. And you could see on the right hand of that chart, recommended periods of ESL instruction. So if you're foundational, so level generally 1, 2 for sure, and then potentially 3, depends on the student, at least 2 to 3 periods. A period is not less than 45 minutes per day of a direct EL instruction delivered by a licensed EL teacher. And if you're transitional, at least 1 period, a period is not less than 45 minutes per day of direct EL instruction delivered by an EL teacher. So at KIS and KES, they're not meeting the recommended minutes for students this school year 24 and 25. And this often is seen not only in the access testing, but it's really seen in our MCAS scores for sure. And I've worked as a principal and assistant superintendent, 2 different districts who, in order to devote this kind of time and this kind of service, the investment in the faculty to make this happen does in fact move the needle on students achieving at grade level. It's an important piece to remember and is the recommendation of the Department of Ed. Proposal to increase recommended EL minutes and external funding. KES and KIS are proposing to add a 1.0 FTE EL teacher, which would increase services at both schools, spending it, 0.5 at KES and a 0.5 would go between 2 schools. Almost all students at KES are within the foundational category, requiring more instructional periods. At KIS, almost all students are level 3 or below, which can be considered foundational or transitional, as I spoke about. Most would be considered foundational, which again requires more instructional periods. I just pointed out here the homeless emergency support funding from DESE may be ending, as we know, and Sarah spoke about that. We can't depend on receiving these funds in the future. And I just spoke a little bit about the Title III is something separate than the grant that I spoke about previous. It's this federal funding through the Department of Ed. Kingston does qualify for Title III funding, which is funding for EL students, and it's at $11,687. And then I just, down here at the bottom, I just highlight that we were awarded a grant for $12,500 to help support the students specifically in Kingston. So those are just some things that I think the additional ask for a full-time EL teacher to go between KIS and KES is an important piece. Their caseload, both EL teachers at both schools, their caseloads are anywhere between 50 and 60 students, which is a Herculean task for a teacher. So that's a little bit of EL information. Thank you.
So the impact, which is simplified here, you're with the 4% increase, you're going to be looking at larger class sizes, K through 6. We're going to have a loss of specialists, loss of student support. We do not know if we will be making maintenance of effort in special education. Because if we cut what we're spending in special education, We need to make sure that we meet minimum thresholds there. So we will need to find out, once we know the direction of the committee, to the best of our ability, whether or not we anticipate we'll meet maintenance of effort. We will have less building upkeep and care. And in terms of the strategy for district impact, our biggest concerns remain with literacy, closing achievement gaps, and student support, all of which are central to this strategy for district improvement. We're not looking at improvement with a 4% increase. We're looking at losses in those areas that will most likely present obstacles for our students. So the next thing is for you to review the budget that has been presented. It's in your packet as well. The capital plan priorities, we have provided those to the town, but again, any changes or concerns, we need to let the town know sooner rather than later. And we need to begin our engagement with community stakeholders with regards to our budget. So at this point, we open it up to questions, but we also open it up to direction from you as to what you would like to see at our next meeting. We know that you're looking for some projections for the possible revenue sources. What do you, sometimes you ask us for a different version at this point. I don't know that you're ready to ask us for a different version at this point. Or if you want to move forward with what we have.
I've got a lot to say, so I can wait till everyone else gets an opportunity.
I'm not sure where to begin here.
Would you like me to start?
Sure.
Okay.
But we'll give someone else a turn.
Well, I've had about a half hour now to digest that I've been called a stonewaller. So I actually take offense to that because I never stonewalled her question. I actually answered it. And then I answered it with the money that we've received. And then I told her she can come to our meeting, but she did. I'm only finding 2 checks that total $350,508. We've had approximately 60 students between KES and KIS that are here in a shelter program. And I understand the need for the EL. Sheila and I were on the committee a few years ago when we actually strongly advocated for an EL teacher, and that was almost proactive because that proved to be the only reason that students were receiving services still at KES and KIS. But the bottom line is we've probably spent well over $900,000 each year educating students that we're not being reimbursed for fairly through the state. We're working within a deficit and it's not sustainable. So that can be considered a political statement, but the bottom line is it's hurting the students that live here in Kingston. And when we talk about things like charging for buses, which kept our children out of school for an extra 4 months during COVID because we weren't allowed to do that, or charging for full day kindergarten, which is the reason that people will take the tax burdens to move to Kingston because we have had full day kindergarten for so long. That's offensive to those families that moved here for those reasons. But I understand the predicament that we're in because we can't afford to lose the amount of staff that's being proposed tonight. I guess I don't want to say that we're all fools because a year ago I sat here saying if we can fund this budget and if we can get a 10.6% education budget passed in Kingston, then we're not going to have these problems this year. But instead, we couldn't pass any of the items that were recommended by our principals because we had to get down to a number that, you know, the public could stomach. And here we are a year later and we're looking at a 17.57% level service budget. That means not one thing's been added to it that is going to benefit our students for next year. And then the $300,000 in requests from our principals, or I believe it was $400,000 in requests from our principals, that's not going to be getting funded either because we don't have money for it unless we cut something else out of the budget. So in 7 years on the school committee, this is probably the most frustrating budget I've ever seen. And the bottom line is we keep coming back to things that we need to do to help students that we don't even know how long they're going to be here. And I don't mean to say that in a very harsh manner, but it's not helping the Kingston students. And it's hurting our schools and it's absolutely damning our budget. So until the state steps in to help us more than the $350,000, then I don't know how this budget is ever going to be sustainable again. So consider that a political statement, but this is very frustrating. So I don't know what we're going to do. I'd like not to lose staff, to be honest. You asked for direction. I'd prefer to see the assistant principals go than to see 4 teachers go. I know that that's something that would be, you know, a huge loss for the administration, but we just can't function with 28 and 29 in classes.
We examined that possibility. We consulted with counsel. We're not able to disregard a contract we have.
That answers that. That would have been my first suggestion. Maybe people should come on and insult me more often. I'll get a lot done.
I mean, this is such a mess. We don't even know where to begin. Because, you know, as has now been shared with everybody, there's really no fat to trim in our budget. We don't spend money excessively on frivolous things. I mean, we have teachers, we have student sports, we have additional things that we need on top of what we have. And yet we're being asked to take away such a significant amount from our students that I don't see how we could, in good conscience, do that. I mean, we were elected to this committee, you know, to advocate for the best education for the students in this town. That is not the best for these students, to say the least. I mean, that is an insult, I think, to the kids of this town who show up, do the work. I mean, I get it. My taxes went up too. We're all in the same boat. We all live here. I have senior parents who live here. Nobody wants to pay any more, but the reality is everything costs more. We have more kids. We have more people. It's the whole town. It's not just the schools, but the kids become the town. Where do we leave them if they have a lousy education because we didn't have enough teachers or we couldn't, you know, support their reading and their math skills? Nobody got, you know, art and music.
I got like 10 years of school committee in me right now, so pretty much I haven't seen a budget like this in ever. And I've been on this committee a really long time. I implemented full day kindergarten. I literally saw all this stuff that we're trying to take away now. And it really is sad because the reason why people live here is because of these things that we have implemented. And we've tried hard, like building in these special programs, these special ed programs to our schools, so they don't go out of district and spend more money. But then we have to fund that too. And again, we're trying to make our infrastructure better in our own town, so we're not spending more money out of district. But you have to remember, we still don't know our shared cost budget still too. So there's still more money on top of this. And so, do you know it?
It's built into the budget.
It is built in.
Hasn't been voted into.
Okay, but it's still there.
It's in.
Oh, that makes you feel a little bit better. Okay, because I'm like, is there more coming? I in good conscience, I cannot and will not go backwards. I just can't, I won't. I don't care. I'm not going backwards. There's no way, after all these years of pushing so hard in this town to make what we have, to say to parents, I'm sorry, you get half-day kindergarten. I'm sorry, you have to pay for buses. I mean, buses I get a little bit in some aspects, but also like, we don't have the infrastructure in our town to have our kids walk. We don't have the sidewalks for our kids to walk.
And
We don't
also
have
ran
the
into the
infrastructure here.
drop off issue that we've already, this
So,
has been brought up to us several times.
and again, every committee, I mean, again, now premises, I was a selectman for 4 years. I know budgets. I understand everybody needs money. I get it. And I'll say it again. I get in trouble when I used to say that when I was on selectman, when I was on school committee, but we are one of the biggest budgets in the town. We just are. We're always going to be one of the biggest budgets in the town. It's how much people want to fight for what we need. That is what it is. I'm not one to stand down, to be honest. So, we have to know what you need existentially and fight for what we need. And I'm not gonna say go back again and get less, because this is literally decimating. We cannot have 18 teachers. We don't have 18 teachers. Let's count right there. That is the entire school system right there, okay? So to me, we either go up and we fight for it and we try to fight for what we need, or, that's just the way it's gonna go. But I mean, I get like people want to keep saying, find places. There's no place to go. We don't have that, and our kids are harder than they used to be. The special education, the EL, I remember being on that call when they all moved in. There's nothing, it's the state. I can't figure it out. I can't get it to go. There's 100 kids in Kingston. The next town over might have 6. We got 100. We have to do something about it. It's mandated, and again, I can hear it all day long. Mandated. We have to do it. We can't not do it. So it is what it is, but that's how I feel. I can't in good conscience take anything else out, so I won't.
I'll say one thing. I look at the budget, the 14,568,000 that we approved last year. And it's hard to reconcile in my mind, $2.5 million additional cost for this year for level services. Is that in it?
One of the things that we all need to keep in mind is that last year's budget was offset by $1.315 million. Sorry, last year's budget was offset by $1.315 million in circuit breaker and 240 grant. And so subtract that out of any, that's just money that isn't there. It was there last year for us to offset the budget.
Right.
And it just isn't there this year, but all of those students need the same services.
Right. I think it's hard. That's what I'm saying. I think it's hard to reconcile the numbers that you're looking at because you don't have the context that you just added in there to say that's not an apples to apples comparison because we had like, take a look at the 14,568,000 and that was actually 16, right? And then so if you're starting from that baseline and going up to what you proposed here, it doesn't look so bad, but it would look worse. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's really hard to get that context and then to just kind of say, okay, you guys say 80% of the budget is salaries. And, if you calculate a number out and look at that, that's well over that, like number that's being added is well over that. And so I have a hard time saying, okay, what's increasing is utilities increase, like you have mentioned some of these pockets, and I don't have like an apples to apples to say, this is the hierarchy of where those big numbers start adding up.
So
you know what I mean? But
so
that's probably in my packet. I just haven't studied it.
Yep. So let me talk about apples to apples comparison. If you look at the budget lines from I'm going to tell you some dirty secrets. I spent 3 days tracking down the fact that if you look through the lines in last year's budget, there is no line for water in Kingston. I know that we pay water bills. There is no line for water. Halifax Elementary pays for water. Plimpton, they have wells. Silver Lake everyone pays for water, and there's no budget line for water in the Kingston budget. And so of course, I'm always here on weekends doing work. So I had to wait till Monday till accounts payable came in. And I said, didn't we just talk 3 weeks ago about an outrageous water bill at Kingston Intermediate School? And she said, yes. I said, how do you pay that? It was paid out of a maintenance of buildings line. So I could probably sit for hours and hours with you and tell you all sorts of crazy things I've learned about where things are and where they shouldn't have been, which I chose to straighten out in the FY 26 budget. So we love apples to apples comparison. But if you look at last year's budget, we're doing not like apples to apples, you're doing apples to mangoes and screwdrivers and boots. That there's things that don't belong. And so the comparison from year to year, you'll get back again next year.
Sure, but I think I'll just say this last thing. This last piece is I just think that when the people that elected us to come up here, they're saying, how can you justify this budget? And I feel like the big number that you just said, the offset, like, where do we start from? What was the base? We spent $14 million this year. We'll spend 568 this year. But that was because we had a huge credit that we're not accounting for. I feel like that's a huge contextual thing to be able to understand and then add up. Here's the incremental salaries and here's all the other stuff that comes with that giant number.
The things with the restructuring though, that were some of the lost, like money we had coming in that.
Right.
Can I actually just speak to that? Because I understand what you're trying to ask. That $1.3 million in circuit breaker funding that we had last year, circuit breaker is always 1 year behind. So that's the reason that we do not have that money in our budget this year, because ideally that money went to Silver Lake. Now, unfortunately, as I think we'll find out on Thursday, that's not much rosier of a picture, but I do want to speak to the salary increases because it's been brought up. So I think I'm at liberty to say a lot of that 3% increase that we're talking about, that was necessary to ask our teachers to complete a restructuring, to not be working at a lesser rate than they were being asked to do, because we were asking some of our staff to move into the Kingston contract. And that's where some of those percent increases come from. But I will, go out on record and say that was a flat contract settled at a 333, which is a 3% increase for 3 years. I don't want anyone to think that next year it's going to be a 4% just to save everyone that headache. But you're right, Sarah, in your presentation, that sometimes that means in regards to the steps and stuff, that ends up being a higher increase. Those considerations are taken into, our negotiation strategies. But a lot of that session was wrapped up knowing that we were facing a detrimental restructuring. And if we didn't want to be paying unemployment costs, which I'll get to in 1 second, then we needed to do something that was beneficial and respectful to our staff. On that note, something that has not been considered as part of this 3 tiers of instruction, if we were to cut that many staff, those would result in layoffs. There's a cost of unemployment. It's not free. You don't just simply say, all right, we're going to take that $60,000 salary back and now we don't have it. We're going to pay approximately 40%, 50% of that salary in unemployment costs for nothing. We're not going to benefit from it. So that's something to weigh. And I would like that number for next time before the public budget hearing in February, what the unemployment cost would be for the amount of staff that we're looking at under tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, simply because I know that when we were talking about the restructuring, full disclosure, now that it's all over, we were looking at nearly $500,000 in unemployment costs that we would be paying as a district. That wouldn't be just Kingston to lay off staff that were not going to be completed in the restructuring. It would have cost us almost $500,000 for nothing. We would have seen no benefit from it. So that is something that I'm curious as to know that dollar amount, because when the public is looking at this $1.7 million in losses to our level service budget, to get down to the 4%, that's something that I think that everyone should be able to consider. Do we want to pay perhaps say 1.5 or $1.2 million in increase, push the town to an override, because it's no secret now that this budget will require an override. But if we were to ask for that, what would be the alternative and what is that going to cost us? Because will we also be in an override if we could get this budget down to say 6-7% and then have to pay the unemployment costs? So I just want to make it clear that even if we were to do what the town's requesting, there's still a cost on this side, and it's not, and we already know the cost and the loss to the students. And I feel like I need to go out on record to say that I'm not saying that we need to turn any students away from Kingston, but there is a cost to providing proper education to all students. And we can see where some of that cost is coming from.
Can I just stop you for one moment, Dr. Prue?
Sure, I just wanted to say that I believe we'll probably have to check with the town of Kingston for the unemployment cost because that's not handled by the district office. And I also wanted to say with regards to both sides of the negotiation table, having participated in negotiations the last few years in Kingston, the reality is that we come to the table and we look at comparative salaries with our member districts, but also within the area and the region. And we want to make sure that we're paying salaries that can allow us to not only attract, but maintain our staff. As you know, we have had difficulties in certain areas finding staff. So I want to bring that up because it's easy to not recognize that part of the difficulty involved in negotiation, but it's an important part. And I just want to reassure people that we're not looking at Kingston at the top of the heap of paying their staff more than other districts. What we're doing is just try to make it competitive so that we don't lose staff and that we can so that we can retain our staff. And I think that's something that I want to recognize for both the school committee side and the Kingston Teachers Association as well.
We're amazing, by the way. Sorry.
Any other questions, comments?
Well, I think for next time, I would, if that's the thing, Sarah, is looking at that bottom line that was approved last year, 14,168, or 568, I think that's important to understand, like, what the credit, making sure people understand what the credit was. And then that's really what we spent this year. Not that we're gonna spend 17,000 or 17% more next year. That's not really true, is it?
Well, Sarah, if I may, I believe part of Tricia's requests, some of these items, for instance, an IEP that's now to district placement may have had a substantial increase. That's 100% out of our control. We don't control those costs. The state allowed these private entities to increase their costs, and we don't have any control over them. We're charged and we're billed for those services, and that's what we're responsible for paying for. So I believe in part of Tricia's requests, what amount is an increase in tuitions? What amount is an increase in like instructional line item, but specific to, I believe, tuitions that may be out of district placements? Not specific to any students, but just for comparison purposes. Thank you.
I think it's working now. I think it's on green, so it must. So you don't have a lot of out-of-district students now, that many, okay, that you had in years prior to this, because they've all shifted over by grade level. So for example, we have none that have transitioned to KES right now. So it's KIS that we're having. And a lot of our students will be transitioning to the 7th grade next year. So we have very, very few. So the budget for special education with regards to out-of-district tuition and transportation, will likely you'll see it go down because we just don't have as many students because they're all transitioned.
I'll ask that question again on Thursday, Dr. Pam. Thank you.
But to touch on what Jeannie said, like in terms of where things can be cut, anything related to special education is not negotiable ever. And whether we put the money in the budget or not, we will provide those services. If we don't put it in the budget, then we contract people out and we pay 3 times the price. And that is just something, you know, to kind of keep in mind that the cuts there are not optional. And if we don't account for them, we'll still pay. We'll just pay more. So. Okay, sorry.
To answer Tricia's question, if we take the FY25 budget and add that 1.3 million back in, then the increase from FY25 to FY26 is 7.8% increase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was really helpful, actually. I think for everybody to
Yeah.
50%.
What's that?
AI. In Massachusetts, the average weekly unemployment benefit is around 50% of your average weekly wage up to the maximum of $1,000 per week. That's what it says.
So $20,000 a week
It'd be a lot of money.
to not have the staff.
Megan,
Yes.
so all the children that are in town, whether the Baymont or wherever, I 100% feel they need to get the education that they're here for, no matter what. But we're getting reimbursed from the state, correct? With the October rolls.
Yes.
So it's not like they're, in theory, not draining more from us.
Just to be clear, the students that are at the Baymont Hotel were there on October 1 of 2023. So they were part of our October 1 enrollment and part of our Chapter 70 funding going into this year and will be next year as well.
Just like every other student, every
Yes.
other resident here. Okay.
Every other student, but every other student doesn't require EL services. And I think that's the point of contention with everybody.
But that's not to say that no student requires EL,
Agree.
correct?
Sorry, and just to clarify, and I don't mean to do a Chapter 70 primer with you, but there's a base rate that you get for each student in your October 1 enrollment. And then there's a multiplier for low income status students, homeless students, special ed. So there's different classifications of students for which you get, I'm just going to call it bonus money. And so a student that lives in Kingston that has an IEP would give us more money than just a student that lives in Kingston. A student that lives in Kingston that has an IEP that's homeless falls into 3 different categories: student, homeless, and IEP.
Gotcha.
But it's fair to say Chapter 70 does not fund our entire budget, or we
Correct.
wouldn't be looking at these deficits.
Correct,
Considerable amount, or a portion, say a portion.
correct.
And like circuit breaker.
Yeah.
Just doing a little bit of math, I'm thinking about the unemployment benefits, it's about $850,000 that we would be spending in unemployment benefits. So it's pretty much a tier 2, almost tier 3, to put you on unemployment. To then, it makes no sense. So then we have no staff, but yeah, we're paying for the unemployment. So I'm just saying, like, it's the yin for the yang kind of situation, just doing the math on it. And we don't have the teachers now. And we're paying $850,000, so we cut this. We cut it. And then now we have nothing and we're still paying. It just doesn't make, I mean, this is the things that I think we need to tell the town, like the people in the town that need to understand
I agree.
these situations, because at the average taxpayer going to town meeting, they don't understand sometimes.
I think people not involved with the school.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I understand you wouldn't have this intimate knowledge and you see the large number. We've all heard it. I get it. And I agree that is much detailed information that we can share to explain all of this, I think is really helpful. I would hope for, taxpayers. But I mean, at this point now, we know we're looking at more of a 7.8% increase than a 17. So that's good. This budget we were presented was 4. So, we have to decide what we want to ask Dr. Green and Sarah, to kind of bring to us the next time. I mean, I will say, all students are entitled to a free and appropriate education. Kingston has always considered itself on the higher end of what we provide in terms of education. And as has already been brought up, people move here because our schools are so great and they want their children to receive a Kingston Public Schools education. That is afforded to all students here, no matter where they live. I just think it's something to keep in mind for everybody. Jeannie, do you have a question?
No, I just have a comment about that because while Kingston gets a good reputation for our school system and it's caused our values to go through the roof and people are moving here for our schools, we also spend on the very low end of the state average for per student spending. It was substantially less than the state average last year. I believe like $4,000 per student less than the state average. So I believe part of this challenge is to bridge the gap towards what we're willing to say that we're not going to offer our students and figure out why we can get away with only allowing our students the bare minimum in costs every year. Because at this point, we've been lucky that we are able to retain the staff that we have, and we've been lucky that we've been able to provide the education that we have and have the amazing things that we do in our schools. I think we can stand up here and argue that all day. I think that's why many people love Kingston, but at some point we need to really be honest that we're not paying more for it. We're just somehow getting charged a lot more. So it's just not working with the town's budget.
I mean, we can't. We just saw what it looks like. The schools couldn't function with that level of loss. And I am pretty confident in saying, I don't think any parent in Kingston would feel okay with what their children would be receiving in return for that price tag.
But I think you hit it, like we're spending so little. We're accustomed to spending so little per student.
And now it's
We have,
expected.
well, yeah, it's expected, but we should change our mindset that we need to spend more to give the students what they need.
Agreed.
I mean, that's
I mean, we
my
just listened
opinion,
to,
and-
we don't meet the recommended minutes for EL
Exactly.
students. That's
Mhm.
just
Well, that for
one,
years.
but that's just one thing though. I'm sure they're probably could use help in, math and reading as well, because, sometimes I don't want to say the bare minimum, but there's always more help, I think, that could be, used in a school, especially, the K-6 set. I mean, we're all aware the foundational years are what set them up for everything that comes after this.
I will say,
Go ahead. No.
You wouldn't.
okay, no, I would just say, like, as devil's advocate, I look at the student population numbers. 1161 last year and 1173 this year, there's only 12 more students, or that increase is even at 7.8. I just would have to understand what those big numbers were that increased, even 7.8, like what's driving those costs? Is it dress salaries? Is it utilities and water and stuff like that? What is driving that cost? And, I think that the students deserve everything that these guys proposed, is what's going on, but at the same time, the town is going to want us to understand what is driving the cost.
Jeannie?
I feel like a broken record because I say it every year, but we can either fund it now or we're going to pay for it later. And I think last year and the year before, also, if I'm not mistaken, it's really been difficult, I think, since 2018, we invested a substantial amount to in-district programming for IEPs, which Dr. Panarese just spoke to. Kingston is actually benefiting from those programs because we do not have as many out-of-district placements as we may have back then. But when we talk about paying more for it, Megan just spoke to that to say that we can contract for those services, but either way, those students are going to receive what they're entitled to because that is part of a free and appropriate education. But I guess speaking to my point earlier about the $15,000, approximately $15,000 a year that Kingston spends per student, several towns spend upwards of $20,000 per student, and we've been on the low end for the last several years. And those are things to take into consideration as we're looking at this. I don't know what the answer is. I'll be honest to our administration that I'd like to wait until the public budget hearing on February 3rd before we give more direction to what tiers of those cuts we can actually stomach, or that I'd be comfortable stomaching. Because I think that the public deserves to be able to weigh in at the public budget hearing. I know that, some parents have already made comments about things that they're hoping are included in the budget. And if I'll make a statement now, if they're not in that budget, they're probably not going to be in the budget. So that's something that we need to keep in mind as a committee as well. Those items presented by the principals are not currently in the numbers that we're looking at cutting. They're not included. So if anyone has any questions about the budget process, please reach out to one of us between now and meetings. And please continue to watch these meetings and be involved, because by the time it does go to town meeting floor, whether or not we're going to be asking for an override, I'd like the public to be as informed as possible because otherwise it becomes extremely contentious and I think the more transparent we are with the numbers, I think the more informed the public is going to be. You agree?
We'll have more information coming, the bus and scan, all that, so I would like to have more information. Revenue.
Just speaking.
Potential.
Speaking about transparency, not today, but within the next couple of days, if you go on the Silver Lake website, if you go to the departments and go to the business office, there's a section on the website for the budget. So the line item budget that you had in your school committee packet, the preliminary budget will be on the district website, followed by all other towns and the Silver Lake budget once I get through the initial school committee meeting with those budgets.
Thank you, Sarah. That's actually already been a question. People were looking for the documents for tonight. So, thank you.
Can I make a request with the additional support needs that were requested by Dr. Whipple and Mr. Materna? Could you include that as to like what the budget would look like? It looks like it's about another $600,000 there. It'd be nice to get that full picture of the additional music teacher. Yeah, just to have everything there, please.
May I actually ask one more clarifying question to our administrators? The full-time unit A, that's not necessarily specific to classroom teachers or specialists. It could be either or. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if we are approaching above the state maximum for class sizes, there's good chance that then specialists go. Is that correct? Like then specialists would have to be considered within those 20 full-time unit A.
Just to clarify, that's not a Sarah decision. So
Understood.
we sat at the table, district administration, building administration, and there's a large number of types of positions that are covered by that unit A contract. And I don't.
So I wasn't presuming that you
Yep.
had that. We haven't directed that. I just want to make sure that that is
At this
clear to everyone that could be either or a combination of.
correct.
Any further questions or comments?
I have one other
Last-
question or comment, sorry. So I know that the recommendations were done by main office, is that correct? By
Central.
central
and
office?
school.
Okay, so
And
all,
school.
okay, all right, I just wanted to see if there was any other input or any personnel that should be taken into account.
Unfortunately, that's, again, I'm not sure who else you think we could
Mhm.
cut, but it's a pretty.
No, but
There is no one else.
no. If there's feedback from our teachers or anybody else that we could take, but, okay.
No, I think if you were to ask any of the bargaining units,
Mhm,
that they
I know.
would not like to see cuts made from their bargaining unit.
Mhm.
I feel like this is.
And it's not to say that they'd like to see cuts from any of the other bargaining
yeah.
units either,
Nobody wants to
but it's not,
see that scope.
it's not common practice.
Mhm.
Those decisions are basically made with the building principal. They are the hiring and firing authority of their buildings. Now, they don't make those decisions in a vacuum. We act as a central office team, but ultimately we work to build consensus. Obviously, there are things that I would step in, or Tricia would step in, or Sarah would step in if we think something is not appropriate or
Mhm.
completely unsustainable or inappropriate. We're gonna push back, and the same happens with our principals. If they disagree, they push back with us, but that's how the meeting goes, and it's very open and honest.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're gonna come up with anything more to say about this tonight. And we will see some more information at our public budget hearing in February, which is strongly encourage people to come to, whether that's in person or attend online. please come get the information, reach out to us, let us know how you feel. We are here to represent the town.
On that note, it's February 3rd. It's not mid to late February. So even though we're asking for this conversation to be tabled until next month, it's not the middle or the end of the month. It's February 3rd.
February. Okay. Just to get back to the rest of our agenda, that we still have a couple of small things here. All right, report of standing committees, admin review.
There's the meeting tomorrow.
Meeting tomorrow. Okay, bylaw. Nothing? All right. PAC. Okay. Union 31.
We're meeting with the towns next week, combined meeting. That's going to include all the town administrators and some, school committee chairs, to review some of the big challenges.
Thank you. Negotiations. Have begun. Budget advisory, we've been advised. Facility oversight. Anything? No? Okay.
Did we get approved for the MSBA grant?
We did.
Oh, boy. Is that something that the town is actively pushing for?
We have already been in contact with the MSBA. That was in a previous school committee packet. We don't have any numbers yet. They're undergoing their review of the facilities, trying to create an estimate. The town administrator is fully aware this will be a warrant article item. The MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, is going to be providing us with grant support towards the roof at KES for those people who are unfamiliar with the request.
Do we know how much the grant was for? Was it?
We won't have those
all.
specifics until the state gets back to us, but the town is aware.
Thank you.
All right. Policy technology. Is that supposed to be two different things?
It is.
Okay, policy. Excellent. Technology. Nothing. Okay. Is there any new business? Okay. Approval of the bill schedule.
Thank you. Our meetings are currently out of sync with the town's bill schedule. On December 9th, there were 10 vouchers totaling $317,387.93. They went out digitally as a single signature warrant and then were submitted to the town. The next warrant is due to the town on January 13th and will also come out digitally.
Thank you.
For it. Thanks.
All right. Other matters unforeseen at time of posting.
No, but just a statement. I really hope that this room stays filled between now and town meeting because anyone that's going to be requesting things at the budget, they're going to want to stay involved. Thank you.
Real quick, I wasn't here, but I'm just very happy about the PTO. I actually at the last minute rallied and did like a million hours of wrapping at the last minute. And I just was so thankful to our town. I have to say more male than female, wrapping for the presents, but it was really great to see everybody come out and the PTO did such work on that. It was, keeping the hours and doing all those things and really without them, we wouldn't have field trips and those types of things. Again, that money is now going to field trips that we wouldn't have again. So I just really want to thank them for all their support through that. And just making sure that we are supporting those types of things because that is how we're getting other special things that we cannot put into our budget ever. So.
Absolutely. We have a great PTO. We have the KFE, we're really, really lucky to have, that kind of support. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Make that motion.
Second.
Excellent. Okay. We'll do roll call. Sheila Vaughn. Michael Shane.
Yes.
Kenny Coleman.
Yes.
Trisha Arietta.
Yes.
And I am a yes. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and we'll see you next month.